Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel that you need to not only survive the current apocalypse but actually enjoy it. And today we're going to be concluding our series on the all-seeing eye. So this is it. And everybody's about to find out what the all-seeing eye really is. I hope that everyone has already watched the 4 video hints, but if you haven't, I highly recommend that you go back right now and watch them all the way through. You'll be doing yourself an injustice if you don't watch the hints and try to go see if you can figure out this mystery for yourself. The first thing that I feel like I have to do is review what the governments of the world tell you the all-seeing eye is. When I say the governments of the world, what I mean is the political systems, the economic systems, and the belief systems of the world. But I'm really just going to be reading to you what the U.S. government says, and you'll just have to either trust me that all governments pretty much stick to the same story, or do your own research. But really, every nation on the earth is part of the same club, and they all back each up on this particular subject. Their story about the all-seeing eye is this. 1. It represents the all-seeing eye of God watching over us. And this is true, but it is misleading because it uses the word God, which translated simply means mighty one, but it doesn't specify which mighty one this is. This is meant to confuse the citizens of civilization, and it does. 2. It represents the eye of enlightenment that brings knowledge to civilization. We're about to find out exactly what that means. And 3. It represents the foundation of democracy. Please remember these 3 definitions as I expose the all-seeing eye for what it really is. I did not make up, alter, or embellish these 3 definitions that I have just read to you in any way. These definitions are directly from the Empire and can be read from any encyclopedia or knowledge base found on the internet. This symbol is found on monuments and flags everywhere, from the moon to the depths of the ocean. It's on the money and documents of possibly every nation on the earth and is the most widely distributed symbol in the world. I already told you that the eye has changed from its original design because of the most significant event in the history of human spirituality, but that it is still the same eye. The eye that most of us are familiar with is made of 3 of the most important symbols in sacred geometry, and that the pyramid shape represents the external reproductive organs of a human female as seen from heaven. The pyramid also represents the Trinity, and the eye in the middle is in fact not an eye, but an embryo. The original eye, known as the Eye of Ra, has all of these features just in a little bit different way. Now I want to show you a few hieroglyphs and explain them to you. First off, this is the hieroglyph for a serpent. This is an older version. In this version you can actually see the serpent's coils as well as the details of his head. This would actually be a horned asp. This image is why you will often see world leaders such as kings and popes doing this. Most people think that this hand sign represents the red pitchfork wielding version of the devil, but it is actually a representation of the horned asp that is seen in the all-seeing eye. This symbol represents the Egyptian king Osiris. Osiris is Satan. The reason that he's not called Osiris in the Bible is because in the Bible we are told that we have to make a name for ourselves with Jehovah. The names that Osiris made with Jehovah are resistor and slanderer, which in the ancient languages translates to devil and Satan. Osiris would not have wanted to go by either of those names in his public life. The ancient Greek historian Diodorus Siculus wrote about the history of Egypt, in which Osiris was described as an ancient king who taught the Egyptian the arts of civilization, including agriculture, then traveled the world. This would explain why people around the world took to cutting down food producing permaculture forests and replacing them with resource-consuming agriculture. It would also explain why the all-seeing eye has been found on nearly every landmass on the planet. We'll be talking more about Osiris in a minute. The next hieroglyph If I can get it out here. The next hieroglyph represents the mother goddess. This is the head, right here. And this is the body. Inside the body you see this circle. That represents an embryo. If this hieroglyph doesn't seem to look like a mother goddess to you, just remember that it's not a photograph or even a painting. It is part of a written language and as such isn't supposed to be filled with unnecessary details. If you think that I'm making more out of this than what it actually is, go to Google Images and type in the search term Mother of God. You will notice that many of the images look just like this, only with more detail. Many of the Madonna and child paintings have the exact same pose, with the child low in the mother's arms, with her head covered by a shroud, very similar to this hieroglyph. And the shape of this hieroglyph is why you'll often see many wives of world leaders, many female world leaders, as well as many homosexual world leaders, doing this sign with their hands. Many people think that they're making a pyramid like this, but the sign only appears as a pyramid for a second while they're making the reproductive organ sign. Okay, the next hieroglyph doesn't look like much, but this is a clincher to the whole thing. This is a simple hieroglyph of a tree. I know that right now you're doubting these characters, or who I'm saying they are, but so I'm going to explain why I believe what I do. A very obvious reason that I believe that Eve was the mother goddess depicted in the all-seeing eye is the similarity in the personal name of Eve and the personal name of the mother goddesses, all of the mother goddesses from ancient times. Eve actually has 3 names in the Bible. 2 of those names, Chava, meaning the living one, and Heva, meaning life, are names that were given to her by God to describe what she became known for over the course of her life, just as most, if not all, other Bible characters were named after the course of their lives, such as when Abram earned the name Abraham, which means father of a crowd. These names are very important, not for their pronunciation, but for their meaning. We'll talk about that a little more a little later on. But another name found in Genesis chapter 2, 18 through 23 is important for its pronunciation. After saying, "This is at last bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," Adam called Eve by the name woman, which in ancient Hebrew was Ishshah, meaning literally female man. This would have been her personal name while on earth, just as Adam's personal name would have been Adam, which means man. That's right. Adam and Ishshah simply means man and woman. This name is important more for its pronunciation than for its meaning, because Ishshah is almost identical in pronunciation to Ishtar. Ishtar is the very earliest version of the name of the mother goddess. This is definitely more than just a coincidence, especially when you consider the distance in time and culture between the ancient city of Babel and the ancient language of the writer of the Genesis account, Moses. Later civilizations called her by similar names, such as Aset in Egypt, Ashtoreth in Assyria, Astarte in Greek, and Ashtart in Phoenician. The festival of Ishtar was celebrated at the beginning of spring with the dyeing of eggs. Remember that the all-seeing eye does not represent an eye, but is only called that. It is actually the ovary or embryo of the hybrid offspring of Satan and Eve. Another line of reasoning that Eve was actually the mother goddess is the story of the mother goddess as recorded in secular history when compared with the history of Eve as recorded in the Bible. Please pay close attention to the following comparisons. In secular writings, the mother goddess is always referred to as the mother of everyone on the earth, or the giver of life. In the Bible, it is recorded that Eve became the mother of everyone on the earth, and since this became her title as the mother goddess, one of the names that Jehovah gave her in the Bible is Hava, meaning life. In secular writings, the mother goddess is said to be the mother of God. In the Bible, it says that spirit creatures called gods came down to earth and made human females pregnant, and this would have occurred during Eve's lifetime. Eve had already displayed a willingness to do the will of Satan when she broke God's law not to eat of the tree that was in the middle of the garden. Eve was the only woman on earth that at one time was perfect. Satan was called the ruler of the demons, and as such it would only be logical that the woman that he chose as a wife would be the most perfect woman alive. If this is true, and I believe that it is, Eve would have become the mother of one of the Nephilim, which were considered gods in their day. The father of her child would have been Satan. In secular writings, Aset, the Egyptian version of the mother goddess's primary power was that of a great magician, whose power transcended that of all other deities, including the Creator. It is recorded that she was able to use her powers to trick the Creator. In the Bible, it's recorded that Eve was deceived into thinking that she was able to acquire knowledge that the Creator was keeping from her. In secular writings, Osiris, the husband of Isis, the mother goddess, was called the Green One, and in ancient images he is often depicted as green, with the upper torso of a man and the lower torso of a snake. In the Bible, it is recorded that after Satan deceived Eve into eating of the fruit that was in the middle of the garden, Jehovah told him that from that moment on his fleshly body would always be one of a serpent. In secular writings, after the mother goddess tricked the Creator, he destroyed civilization with a flood. It is also recorded in the Bible that after the fall of man, the Creator destroyed civilization with a flood. In secular writings, the mother goddess' husband was cut to pieces and killed, and she had to resurrect him, Eve. She was unable to find his penis and had to use a metal device called an Ankh, or the key of life, which is the cross with a handle on it. I'm going to show you what that looks like. The Ankh, key of life. She had to use the Ankh, which is called the key of life, in order to impregnate herself. Now, in the real world, serpents do not have any external genitalia, which could explain why Eve could not find his penis. And if you grew up on a farm, you'll recognize the Ankh as being very similar to one of the syringes that are used to artificially inseminate cattle. In many paintings throughout the centuries, the mother goddess is often portrayed holding her baby while angels bring her some version of the Ankh. You can see this for yourself if you simply go back and look at one more time at the images that you found while looking up Mother of God. Now I'm going to show you how I'm able to tie all of this into the all-seeing eye. I told you that the all-seeing eye contained the Trinity. In a later version, the Trinity is represented by the pyramid. In the older version, it is within the image of the eye itself, and here it is. Sorry it's taking me so long to get all this together, but I want you to see this. Okay, you see that that's the eye down there. Okay, we're going to turn it sideways. And here it is. Okay, Satan, there's Satan, standing behind his wife Eve, the mother goddess, and in the Trinity, he is known as the Father. Eve's position in the Trinity was that of the Holy Mother. In Eve's womb is the embryo of a Nephilim. In the Trinity, the embryo is known as the Son. This particular Nephilim is the one that is spoken of in all of the religions of the ancient world. His name here is Horus. In other cultures, he is called by such name as Hermes, Heracles, and Hercules. If you remember, Hercules was the son of Zeus. I told you before that the name of God in the Bible, which is Yahweh or Jehovah, was removed at one time and replaced with the Lord, word Lord, in all capital letters. This was the end result, but there was an intermediate step that I didn't tell you about. In the original King James Version of the Bible, the name wasn't replaced with Lord, but with Zeus. It was only in modern times that the King James Version of the Bible replaced Zeus with the word Lord. The King James Bible also added scriptures that are not found in any of the original Bible books, which make Jehovah seem to be a part of a trinity similar to Satan's trinity. Some of those spurious Trinitarian scriptures can still be found in modern versions of the King James Bible today, as well as other Bibles in the Empire that are based on the King James Version. Excuse me. Back to the image. Okay, we already said this is Satan. That's Eve, and that's her embryo of Hercules. And this image right here, last but not least, is a tree. It's the tree of knowledge of good and bad. This tree was placed in this image to memorialize Eve's acts of defying or tricking the Creator. If you Google the Eye of Ra, you will find images that incorporate the texture of a trim palm, or of trim palm fronds running up the trunk of this tree. In fact, one I saw, it was like an amulet. And it had the same exact image, but just a whole lot of detail in the snake, a whole lot of detail in Eve, and the tree itself actually had like palm fronds, you know, bark, the bark that's on a palm tree. That means that all of the definitions that the Empire gives you about the eye are misleading. This is the eye of God, but only if your God is Satan. It represents, and that's the first, remember the first definition, eye of God. It represents the eye of enlightenment that brings knowledge to civilization. From Lucifer, who the Bible says keeps transforming himself into an angel of light. Remember that Eve was deceived into thinking that she would become enlightened when she ate from the fruit of the tree that was in the middle of the garden. And as I've already said, that image is memorialized right here on the all-seeing eye. Now the third definition, it represents the foundation of democracy. This is true. Think about it. The form of government that existed before Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden fruit was a theocracy, which means rule by God. That's the definition of theocracy. God spent his time caring for his human children, and they in turn spent their time caring for all of the earth's animals. This is how the hierarchy of a true theocracy works. Democracy, by definition, means rule by the people. Every nation on the earth is a democracy by definition. We call nations like North Korea a communist state, which implies that it is somehow different from a democracy. But if you go to North Korea and ask one of its citizens how their government works, they'll tell you that their government is based on self-determination, which by definition is a democracy. Or as I just said, rule by the people. Right now you're saying to yourself, wow, that's pretty neat, but I really don't see what any of this has to do with understanding the future. Well, it all goes back to what I said earlier about how the eye changed because of the most historic event in human spirituality. Back when Satan was still able to materialize a fleshly body, he was king. His son, Horus, also known as Hermes, Heracles, and Hercules, was given control over all of the earth's resources, including the people. And his wife Eve was the spiritual foundation of the empire's belief system. Why do I say that? Because all empires require massive amounts of unsustainable resources in order to exist. One of those resources is human slavery, or the ability to make people do things that do not come naturally to humans, like building roads, government buildings, and massive monuments, working in agriculture, producing food not just for themselves but for thousands of others, participating in carnal warfare. There is no plausible explanation as to why anyone would do such unnatural things when they would much rather be at home with their families, relaxing and spending time eating fruit that was readily available for whoever was willing to reach up and pick it. So why did they do it? They did it because Satan promised them the same thing that he had promised Eve in the garden. If you do what I tell you to do, you will not die, and in fact you will become enlightened. So as long as Eve lived, the citizens would continue to do as they were told. The empire would remain strong, because if Eve died, then a lie would be discovered, and the empire would have nothing else to offer its citizens to make them keep working. This is why in the Bible Eve was given the name Chava, meaning the living one. It would have been her title in the hierarchy of civilization. I said that both versions of the I contain the Trinity. I explained that Satan was king, and as such he represents the political system of civilization. His son Horus, being in charge of all the earth's resources, would have represented the economic system of civilization. And as long as civilization's belief system was based on Satan's ability to keep humans alive, Eve, the mother of everyone on the earth, represented civilization's belief systems. No matter how much you may want to not believe it, no matter how much effort you put into denying it, and no matter how much time you put into trying to prove me wrong, civilization itself is a false god. If you put your faith in it to provide for your needs, it is your god. If you do things that you really don't want to do in order to support it, it is your god. If you pray for it to somehow recover, it is your god. And just like all of the false gods, it is a trinity. Civilization is made up of three parts. And just as the pyramid represents civilization, the three cornerstones represent its three main parts. And without all these parts in place working as they should, civilizations cannot stand. Those three parts are: 1, the political system; 2, the economic system; and 3, the belief system. Without these three distinct systems in place, no civilization can exist. The Eye of Horus, the all-seeing eye, the Eye of Providence, the Eye of Ra, all of these are one and the same. They are all symbols representing civilization. They all represent civilization's chief cornerstones. If you think that a civilization can exist without one of these systems in place, you are wrong. If you think that there are other systems that should be included, you are wrong. You may think that the military system should be added, but that is nothing but an enforcement tool of the economic system. What about the judicial system? That is nothing more than an enforcement tool of the political system. There is absolutely no reason to overthink this thing or make it more complicated than it is. Just take a little bit of time to cool off and think about it with an open mind, and you'll see that what I'm telling you is the truth. In the Bible, at Matthew chapter 6 and verses 22 and 23, it says, "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great that darkness is." This scripture is speaking about the eye as if it is your physical eye. I've heard many sermons on this scripture that never really did satisfy my curiosity about this particular passage, but just from my discovery about what this all-seeing eye is, and knowing that this idol would have been distributed throughout the empire and clearly visible in the time of Jesus, I now understand what Jesus was talking about. If the trappings of civilization's kingdom cloud your mind, you will never be able to see clearly the benefits of God's kingdom, which is in direct opposition to civilization's kingdom. If you regularly pray for God's kingdom to come, what do you think that you're praying for? You're supposed to be praying for God's kingdom to replace civilization. In Luke chapter 17 verse 31, after telling his listeners about what was going to happen in the last days, Jesus said, "Remember Lot's wife." What does that mean? Let's take a look at that story. Two angels entered Sodom to warn Lot and his family to flee because Jehovah was getting ready to destroy Sodom and everybody within it. They were told to leave immediately, and they did. Lot and his family fled, including his wife. And yet she was still killed and turned into a pile of salt. But there was another instruction that Lot and his family were given, and that was a command to not look back. We're led to believe that it was the act of turning her head that cost Lot's wife her life. But the phrase, "don't look back," is one of those idiomatic phrases that are often found in the Scriptures. In fact, this idiomatic phrase is still in use today in our language. To look back simply means to reminisce. Lot's wife was reminiscing about how much she missed civilization, and the Creator, who can look into the heart, knew it. She didn't die because she turned her head. Now, what was the event that I keep talking about that changed civilization forever? It was the death of Eve. If you don't think that Eve's death was a big deal, just imagine that you have spent your entire life working all the time for a God or for a goal that was never real. There are probably many others that had died before Eve, such as Abel. But remember that Abel was killed for doing the Creator's will. Satan could have easily said that Abel died because he worshipped the wrong God. In fact, no matter who would have died, Satan could have made the same claim. But his queen? That would have been unexplainable. It would also have been impossible to cover up. Remember that at that time, everyone on the earth would have been the offspring of Eve. You can only tell someone that their mother or grandmother is busy somewhere else for so long before people start getting suspicious. Now here's where the first major change took place. I told you that the original Trinity was made up of the Father, Son, and Holy Mother. Well, once Eve died, that all had to change. She would no longer be presented on the throne next to the king and her son. So it is only logical that in an attempt to keep the empire alive, another lie had to be told to cover up the first lie. Satan would have probably told his people that Eve was still alive in heaven, or perhaps on earth as a ghost. So now the Trinity would no longer be Father, Son, and Holy Mother, but Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The fall of Eve would have represented the beginning of the end for Satan's first empire. Neither the Bible nor secular history records what the world before the flood experienced before its inevitable collapse. I don't imagine that it would have been much different than the collapse that we're experiencing as a society right now. But we do know the end result. Whatever was left of civilization was erased from the earth when God brought about the flood of Noah's day, so that we could try to start over without the influence of demons and their offspring in the flesh. With Satan no longer able to materialize a fleshly body and create hybrid offspring, people could no longer see the Trinity of civilization sitting on their thrones. It would no longer be reasonable to put their images on the all-seeing eye. The eye was redesigned to accommodate this radical change. Obviously, human rule since the flood has not turned out much different than demon rule. And Satan's eye is still the goal towards which most of mankind marches on. The all-seeing eye is simply the idol that represents civilization. And civilization is still the religion of the state. If you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.